Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from lastcar.info coming at you after the conclusion of the Ally 400 at the Nashville Super Speedway, the first race of the season for NBC. Ross Chastain's first win of the season this year. Plenty of things to definitely talk about, including Ryan Blaney unofficially, your last place finisher of today's race here. So let's see. Am I getting an echo here? Hopefully not. Okay, let me know if there are any issues in the audio here, so we'll jump in from there. But thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you had a great off weekend. I know we did not do a show last week. However, I did want to make sure that, I was able to get some work done on some other videos here, and we'll talk about that along the way and kind of jump into that. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into the race itself. Congratulations again, Ross Chastain on this, with his first pole coming into this weekend, his first win, just really thoroughly dominated the race. And I know that these days, with the playoffs being what they are and so forth, I think it could be believed by some that maybe this wasn't an interesting race, kind of like back at Sears Point. But much like at Sears Point, there was a lot going on here. And really at times we had some pretty tight battles. Truex and Hamlin had really good cars. Tyler Reddick was right in the mix there again. Unfortunately, had that issue on pit road and really couldn't recover from that. You lose 2 laps in a race like this where you have some long green flag runs and you just can't come back up there. However, I think, again, the 45 team is still kind of a sleeper this year ever since their turnaround at Phoenix here. But for Chastain, I saw some comments here already coming into this, talking about the fact that, things have kind of fallen off a little bit for Chastain since that wreck back at Darlington earlier this year. But still, but I think it's still something very positive to look at here and really kind of see what's going to be happening with him going forward here. So, but Truex back in 0.7 of a second behind. Looked like Truex was going to kind of challenge for him here at the end of the race there. Maybe have potentially a closer finish there out of the number 19. He's definitely been on a stretch run, not just the Sears Point win, the great rally he had over at Gateway before that, and now coming into this one here. Again, I'm sure he's playing with house money here at the same time. How all this is going to carry over into the Chicago Street Course next week, of course, is anybody's guess at this point here. And we'll talk more about the NBC broadcast along the way, too. I know there's definitely a lot of thoughts on that, especially as compared to Fox earlier this year. Again, going back into the race results here, Chastain, your winner, Truex in the second spot, Hamlin in third, Chase Elliott in fourth, Kyle Larson in your fifth place position there, William Byron and Christopher Bell. Eric Jones, great job by the Legacy Motor Club there, finishing in the 8th spot there. Best run I think we've seen really out of Jones really most of the season here. I know he's had top 10s before, but this one here, a very nice, calm night, not getting in any trouble out there and running. He's usually very good at places like Darlington that he's won, of course, most recently last fall. Able to stay competitive up there and be a factor in these finishes. But it's certainly good to see a turnaround for that team. I mean, especially after the 600, where you had all 3 of their cars in the garage area and racing to get back out. And that was just a few weeks, really just a month ago, really, that happened. So a great turnaround for them. Also happening at the same time that Noah Gragson comes back over there in the 42. I know he was a bit further back in the lineup here, showing him in the 26th spot. Looks like about the 5th or 6th car, 1 lap down there for him. But good to see Noah back out there after the concussion that he suffered over at Gateway with that very hard hit a few weeks ago. But good to see him back out there, and hopefully that's something that's also helped the combined effort there of that program. Kyle Busch coming back from a litany of problems, including briefly running in last place with an unscheduled flat tire early in the race, 9 pounds in the right rear, and coming down pit road very early on, losing a lap in the process, then clawing his way back up there, getting involved in the Ryan Blaney incident on the restart there after Brad Keselowski kind of caught up the front of the pack there, and still coming back to finish in 9th there, gaining a couple spots at the end, showed a lot of determination there. Which is good to see. I'm so used to old Kyle Busch where things don't go his way. He kind of rage quits in the middle of the race there, and that's as good as it's going to be. But he showed a lot of determination out there, and definitely got to give him his props for that one. And then AJ Allmendinger. As much as I'm not a fan of Cup guys in the lower series, and of course he did go out and stomp the field there in the Xfinity race, even to the point where Cole Custer was raising questions about how legal that car may or may not have been. But that car did pass inspection, and Allmendinger won Saturday and comes back in this race and finishes 10th. Probably the best run we've seen out of either of the colleague cars all of this year. I know Haley was very good in qualifying as well. Not sure exactly what it is with this particular track that appeals to the both of them. Of course, you usually think of Allmendinger and the road courses, and Haley, of course, having his only win over at the Super Speedway in Daytona. A little bit of a different circumstance here at Nashville with all that. But again, fantastic to see there at the same time. But congratulations again to Ross Chastain here. A little bit of a snafu there after the race finished. Daniel Suarez trying to reenact, I guess, their celebration from COTA last year. Then unfortunately getting tangled up there with the 14 car. Looked like he just didn't see that he was there at all and destroyed the right rear of the 99 car, which was itself their backup car. But Suarez himself, I mean, the only hiccup on a night where he otherwise finished in the 12th spot, which is way better than I think he was expecting, certainly, having to start at the back of the field with everybody else at the same time there. So a lot of interesting storylines from this, and I think a good overall race for a lot of the field. Again, may not have had the most crashes and so forth there, but we did see some flashes of it. We saw some decent battles side by side for the lead. We saw some potential of drivers actually being able to kind of get back up and challenge for the lead. Tires were just certainly a factor at the end after not really being as much of a factor earlier in the race. Kyle Busch able to stretch his fuel to the end of stage one there after his unscheduled stop at the beginning was certainly a bit eye-opening there at that point. But again, definitely got to give respect where it's been earned there. Ty Gibbs in the 14th spot, just outside the top 10. Bubba Wallace in 15th. Looked like he was going to have a solid run out there, but again, good to see a good finish there. Ryan Preece was briefly in last place. He ended up in the 16th spot at the end of the day. Haley was the second car, one lap down in 23rd. Stenhouse was sitting in the lucky dog spot there as that race reached its conclusion. But again, unofficially, your last place finisher in this race, which was easily the longest last place battle of any of the three races we had at Nashville this weekend, is Ryan Blaney. His first last place run since the spring Bristol race in 2020, which, of course, during that year was late May. He was driving the Menards car, of course, back then as well. Only his third last place finish for Penske, but I believe the fifth overall in his Cup career. Ends up taking the last place spot. The only car that did not finish the race, everybody else within 4 laps of the leader, including Todd Gilliland. Poor Todd had just a miserable luck out there. The team sounded really at loose ends about what handling issues they were having and how much ground they were losing. Looks like they at least managed to not lose a whole lot more laps at the end. I'm so used to these races from the late Gen 6 era where a driver in their position would maybe finish the race 8 or 10 laps down, even at a mile and a third or mile and a half kind of track like this. But in this case here, field's still relatively tightly bunched together. Anybody that had, a minor problem still ended up, only just a couple of laps down, like Tyler Reddick there in 30th, with even the many situations he had on the entrance of pit road there, still not being any further down the rankings there, but also having drivers that weren't that many more laps behind him, kind of kept everybody else honest here at the time. But certainly talk about Ryan Blaney's accident. We cannot not talk about the concrete barrier that he ran into at the exit of pit road. I, like many of you, were very surprised that there were barriers at this track, especially one that's relatively new to the circuit here. We're going to be talking about it in actually upcoming 500 Days episodes here too, that there's any barriers that were not protected. And the problem is these drivers, they literally, Jeff Gordon had this happen multiple times in his career. The wreck at Las Vegas, the ones that he had at Richmond. It seems like these gaps where you have, emergency equipment enter and exit the garage area, seem like sometimes they don't have the safer barriers on them. And it seems like it's some of the more egregious tracks, places like Pocono and Talladega, where you see these massive hits into the inside wall. A lot of that has been closed up, but it was very shocking to not see that here. Even ironically, a Ford sponsorship on the barrier as well that he ran into. But glad to see he was checked and released from the infield care center. And him saying that that's the hardest hit of his career should open some eyes, given the fact that he's now becoming really more, not one of the most experienced veterans out there. But that opinion should carry a lot of weight going forward. So absolutely, they need to do something about, putting these safer barriers there. They probably think that there's certain spots on the track that a car is not going to spin out into, but it can happen anywhere. And I know you can only do so much to make these tracks safe. I get that you really can't do it on the pit road wall itself, because then you have a hazard for pit crew members to come over the wall. And of course, you don't want people spinning out down there anyway. Seen enough hazards with that, like Armani Williams' wreck at Charlotte not too long ago there. But any of these areas, even at the exit of pit road, I think that needs to be looked at a bit more closely, and hopefully they'll re-examine that certainly going forward. But Ryan Blaney completed 146 laps before he was wrecked on that restart there and eliminated the number 12 from the field. And again, his first last place finish unofficially, pending the results of post-race inspection since 2020. Your bottom 5 finishers there: Todd Gilliland in the 35th spot, Josh Bilicki in 34th. And I got to give a shout out to Bilicki over his radio. I did hear both BJ McLeod and the team spotter were very impressed by how well Bilicki was learning the draft and being able to kind of draft off other cars out there. Seems to be absolutely invaluable with these new cars out there, with how dependent they are on the circulation of air through the car and side drafting and so forth. I know he finished 3 laps down in 34th, and yes, obviously he's also only in that car part-time, but for a driver of his caliber, where he's much more focused on road courses and he's still kind of developing into running more of these oval races, it was good to hear, especially during a race even, that he's being able to kind of get some better runs through traffic there. I mean, with the limits that they have on practice and qualifying nowadays, it's kind of a situation where these drivers really need to just capitalize on anything. And if you're back in the pack and you're not really competing for the win, the race becomes your practice session. You got to just kind of do the best you can. So again, kudos to Bilicki, your 34th place finisher in this race. Brennan Poole and Ty Dillon rounding out your bottom 5 in that order there. Looking back here too, Chase Briscoe, as Kyle Busch remarked on his radio, was very surprised why Briscoe was was way back in the pack. We've seen this even with the technical infraction he had at Charlotte, where he was running in the back there. I don't know what on earth is going on over there. I know there's been a sea change of everything going on with Harvick. Of course, this past week we had the news of confirming what was long believed to be true, that Josh Berry is going to take over for Kevin Harvick next year. Congratulations to Josh on that. I personally think it's a great fit. I think you got another driver that, has that kind of hard scrabble, short track background like Harvick has. Certainly it's great to see him come up through the ranks as he has with JR Motorsports. And I'm sure that, it's mixed emotions for Dale Jr. and Kelly and the others there, that, you have this talent that you've developed, you plucked him out of the short tracks and given him the opportunity that a lot of those drivers just don't have anymore. And a big part of that is the lack of the number of seats that are available, which, as in the Cup Series, of course, is because of the charter system, to the point where they couldn't move JR Motorsports into the Cup Series. And ultimately, the best ride that was available that came up was for a different manufacturer. And so now he's going over to a Ford team. That's going to be, I'm sure it's bittersweet. It wouldn't surprise me at all, certainly from the interviews. As to his age, I thought Dale Jr. captured that perfectly, discussing the fact that Harry Gant came up at a very old age in his career, and he had a successful career, could have won championships, won plenty of races, well into his 50s. And these days, heck, we got drivers that are coming from multiple other disciplines that aren't aware of all the boy pilots that are in the Cup Series these days. And, if you get guys out there, we're going to see it with Van Gisbergen and the Chicago race. We're going to see it with Kobayashi coming up in Indy. You could still have older drivers in there throwing elbows with these other guys. And I don't think that that is an outdated thing at all. I think we're going to really kind of see a bit more of that coming up. So again, congratulations to Josh. Huge effort for him, certainly with the success that he's had under very difficult circumstances, being a relief driver these last few years, kind of like what we saw with Regan Smith and Alex Bowman, which in different degrees helped their careers for Hendrick Motorsports. Getting that runner-up finish at Richmond and, running so well as he has, they had to find a place for him. And I'm just glad that they were able to. And I think it solves two halves of that with the Kevin Harvick deal. Great job by the Stewart-Haas team on that video they did to promote that effort too. I thought that was very well done. Stewart-Haas's team has really been able to pull on the heartstrings this year between that and definitely the one that they did when they announced the 29 for Harvick to run at Wilkesboro. I thought that was very well done as well. But looking through the rest of the results here, J.J. Yaley back in the 29th spot here. A little bit off kilter for him. It actually kind of shows how much he's really improved with Rick Ware Racing and actually kind of fighting for top 20 finishes there or top 25 runs, at Charlotte and so forth. This is actually a little bit off for him this time around. Maybe it's just the off weekend or the fact that other drivers have been in that car for so many weeks now. But hopefully things will kind of get better for him there too. Kevin Harvick, the flat tire on the number 4 machine there, finishing back in the 24th spot. An unfortunate deal for him. Joey Logano still not up to speed this year. That stretch run that he's had going into this break after Sears Point has not really improved. He still ends up back in the 19th position there, 1 spot ahead of Corey LaJoie and 2 ahead of Harrison Burton, the third from last car on the lead lap. And this is a kind of track that you would think would be in like Logano's wheelhouse, given his wins at like Las Vegas and so forth here, but just absolutely was not the case this time around. So there's definitely drivers. There's ones that you got to continue to watch. Chastain definitely moving up the rankings here with his first win of the season, I believe. Yeah, he was the first. He was a top driver without a win in terms of the point standings coming into this. So this definitely changes the complexion of that, depending on where he fits into the overall chase grid. And then it puts the onus back on Harvick. I'm looking at my chase standings here off camera. But Harvick now, the onus is on him. Are we having a Jimmy Johnson 2020 scenario where Johnson wrecked at the end of that stage at the Darlington race and never seemed to really kind of come back from that to win in his last season? I hope that wasn't what we saw at Phoenix earlier this year, where that late race caution kind of screwed him out of that win there. But again, things happen at the end and it can play out differently. But there's still, we're in that stretch run now where we're counting down the number of starts until the playoffs. And that's going to be another thing to certainly talk about there too. Let's take a look here. Oh, Beast Metal, thank you so much for the super chat, man. You didn't have to do that. Thank you. I see it's about NBC. I'm just kind of glancing at it here. I guess we could do that. We'll transition into kind of talking about that a little bit. Beast Metal again. Looking at your comment, I see NBC is out to break barriers and terrible broadcasting this year. Totally dumping pre-race because the crybaby East Coast station groups want garbage local news. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. Beast of Metal. Thank you again for the super chat there for sure. And welcome back here to the show, by the way. Yeah, so, I guess we can go into the NBC discussion here on this, and we'll get into the Xfinity and Truck Series races here at the same time. It's tricky. It's tricky. And I've seen, one of my writers has kind of had a number of discussions about this week, too, and I think it just shows, how contentious the issue is. All of us, for sure, going into this race, we're breathing a bit of a sigh of relief that Fox wasn't broadcasting any more races this year, at least not on the Cup Series side. Obviously, the Truck Series thing is going to continue. But the approach, seeing a lot of, the just missing a lot of the action, a lot of the calls like, oh, he got turned, when there's a wreck on the last lap of the Daytona 500. A combination of too much and then not enough. And just unbalanced. And I know part of that was bringing these guest commentators in, and so forth. And I think the discussion that we had last year with a lot of the videos like the ones I posted, has continued. I mean, how much of this is a talent issue? How much of this is a production issue? And every time we have this transition, it's always, thank God it's NBC. Like, thank God they're taking over, and it's going to be a whole lot better, and it's going to be just 100%. And in some ways, NBC does do things better than Fox. What I would caution against, and is that, and again, and I think I'm gonna be more opinionated on this the more races we see this year, is they're susceptible to their own problems. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is ever. I think even back in the day with ESPN and TNN and so forth, I mean, would I say each one of those was absolutely perfect? No. Like, I mean, one of the things I thought was great about some of those, when Bob Jenkins would misspeak on something, like Benny Parsons would correct him, and then, Bob Jenkins would kind of laugh it off, which was great because Bob was always, the very professional kind of, straight-laced one in the group, but he didn't take himself so seriously that he couldn't play along with things like that. Like, everyone brought out the best in each other. I think that's kind of the important thing. And it's all about balance. I think that both on the talent side and the production side, there are some clear improvements, but I don't think that admitting that is exclusive from saying that there's not stuff that they still need to work on, including things that are problems that NBC has that Fox does not. The first problem that NBC has right off the bat is just too many cooks in the kitchen. Thankfully, you didn't really have Rutledge Wood in this broadcast. There would have been no room for him. There's just so many people they have out there. I mean, you got Kyle Petty and Dale Jarrett here. You got the guys in the booth. You had it to the point where the race started early, so Junior and Jeff Burton on pit road, and everybody's just shouting in this and shouting that and over the top of each other, and they're constantly filling the air with just stuff, just so much stuff. It's like, whoa, just scale it back a little bit. Just scale it back just a little bit. Like, I know when Fox happens, like, they'll leave pregnant pauses, or they'll just miss stuff, or they just won't sound interested in it. And okay, that's one set of problems. But when you have another set where everybody's just kind of chirping over, I mean, not every split second of the broadcast needs to be filled with. I mean, what do we always hear when we have complaints about Fox? It's like, well, you can just listen to the radio. Well, radio, you got to be right on it, and you got to fill everything with noise because there's nothing else there. But in this, you have some visuals that you can actually work with it. You can actually kind of let the visuals tell the story. Alan Bestwick was fantastic with that and was very outspoken in how little he would say in one of these broadcasts versus, what would happen elsewhere. And I know there's a lot of tools and a lot of stuff and a lot of there's different angles. When you have this many people in there, you have this many different viewpoints of what's happening. And so what you just hear constantly is they're kind of talking to each other, but they're not describing the action. It's almost like there's this conversation going on, and then Rick Allen, there'd be a silence, and then Rick Allen would say like, "Oh, this is happening right now," and it would be like kind of just it would feel like weirdly out of place. That's a unique problem to NBC, and it's not new because when something big does happen, we didn't really see it as much in this because this race wasn't as wild as we've seen a lot of the other ones. I think next week in Chicago, we may see this really like cranked up to 11. I mean, people just talking over each other and shouting and stuff like that. That's kind of the issue there. So, but I don't want to say in pointing that out. I think personally that's probably the biggest problem. There's still a little bit of the same on the production side. There's still a little bit of the same problems from Fox where they're not showing what's happening in other parts of the track and they zoom in too close to a car. We saw this more in the Xfinity Series race. We didn't really see it in the Cup Series race today. Today, they did a really good job. I like they did through the field there in a couple of different parts, especially when we had a long green flag run. They cut it off a little early. It wasn't like really everybody in the field. I know there was some comments I was seeing a little bit earlier. It's like, well, can you really expect them to talk about everybody in the field? And I'm like, yeah, watch some old Bill Weber stuff. They'll go through, you watch an NBC race from 2001, 2002, they'll talk about everybody. They'll have something to say. So, and I always say that about, the things I do at LastCar there. Even the people in the back of the field are a story. So, who knows? But, that's kind of the other aspect. But there were definitely some signs in this broadcast. And again, I don't want to throw the Xfinity broadcast out the window really too much either, because there was some really good stuff there. That clip where Dale Jr. and Jeff Burton are on pit road and the engines are fired and they're describing what's happening. That was marvelous. That was great. That was so much closer. It actually kind of improved on kind of like the thing your ESPN would do where you had the only thing that would have been better is if you had you had the thing where you had different pit reporters and they'd be stationed by different cars and they would tell you about this driver versus that driver and how they've been performing the recent weeks. And they're doing a little bit of that. But it was kind of more like this is the spectacle, like the overall spectacle of the sport. And beyond just all the cars, like that was a great way to introduce the race. And then you kind of get into it and kind of narrow it down more to like, who are these different drivers and how did they play off each other? I thought that was really good. And the other thing that was a massive difference, and I noticed this, especially in the Xfinity Series race, because we saw this compared to the Truck Series race, I believe it's Charlotte, where you had that great race for second place, even though Ben Rhodes was running away with it. So what did Fox do? Fox just went, it's like coming off the corner, they just completely focused on Ben Rhodes, and that was it. And they weren't going to show anything behind there, even though that battle for second with like Dean Thompson and those others was completely up in the air. And they didn't even show it when they went to that because they were cutting to, get the reaction shot on pit road. Now in this Xfinity Series race, we had a very similar scenario. AJ Allmendinger had a huge lead at the end of the race there, and you got another tight battle for second. Riley Herbst has only finished second like 2 other times in his career, still is trying to get his first win. Had a good chance at it here. But that's the battle. And you noticed, again, this is kudos to the production side of this. They were staying with that second place battle all the way to the finish, which was a good decision ultimately because there was a crash around that spot too. Anthony Alfredo and some few others, Parker Kligerman and others were involved there at the same time. So they didn't let that get missed. And they also did the split screen thing. We saw this, really in both races, both Xfinity and Cup. And you would see multiple battles around the track. If somebody's leading and they've led 99 laps or something like Chastain did or like Truex leading there, let's see what's happening in different parts of the track and show as much of it as possible. And you do that instead of getting your back up and saying, oh, well, if you miss this, if you say we missed too much, you better buy a ticket and go to the race. You can't do that. That's a cop-out. Not everybody, and there's not even a lot of media people that can cover the entire season. How do you expect a fan to go see, 90 combined races, 90 or 100 combined truck, Xfinity, and Cup races? That's outrageous. So, when you have these and you see these split screens and they're showing other stuff that's happening, and maybe one of them becomes more important and then it becomes the main screen. The production, I thought, was much better. Much better. And again, sometimes they fell into little habits there. I don't like the RoboCam in the corner that still shows the cars whoosh by and you can't see what's happening instead of having an infield shot. You can see cars kind of in formation, what's happening. I don't like when they zoom in too much on one single car. If you're going to do that sparingly. But yeah, just try to really inform people what's happening. It's, I think if there was a negative on that production side of it, it was almost like with the booth. It's almost information overload. You have like so much stuff that's happening, and you have the leaderboard. I love the pit road timer. I love the little thing I love the chyron that came up in the corner at the end of each of the stages that would say in brief little statements what happened in the previous stage. So if you tuned in late, you got this information. It was kind of like an extrapolation on that leaderboard thing that Fox had, where it would show when the cautions were versus the green flag runs. I thought that was nice. See, again, these are a lot of positives. I don't want to make it seem like I'm against NBC. And again, these are just my impressions just from the first week. But the issue I have is with stuff that just hasn't necessarily been fixed since they really came on in 2015. I still feel like Rick Allen comes off a little awkward in the booth. I think he either seems unsure of himself or he doesn't assert the same presence like Mike Joy does. Or that other broadcasters would, or he feels like he's having a hard time doing the play-by-play because everybody else is doing the play-by-play. It definitely seems like there's a little bit of a struggle there, and there's a clash of personalities there. I think Steve Letarte and Dale Jr. and as self-deprecating as Jr. is about his ability to do play-by-play, I know he gets a thrill out of doing it. Who wouldn't? But there needs to be a purpose for it. There needs to be a way that you show deference to somebody that's the main play-by-play guy, and then you support that guy. You don't just start saying your other stuff at the same time. So that's kind of the issue I have with that. So that hasn't really improved. And again, a big part of that is having too many in the booth. They actually kind of fixed the problem a little bit by having Junior and Jeff Burton on pit road for the start, although I think that wasn't intentional. A lot of people were pointing this out too, and I agree with them. I think it's just that, they ran out of time because they moved the start of the race up, and so they didn't have a situation where, they could get up there quick enough. And then, of course, the offsetting problem is, of course, they're on pit road and they got to shout so you can actually even hear them. And so the shouting problem didn't go away. And I hear this gripe that I get whenever I bring something like this up. It's always like, oh, why can't people have fun at their jobs? It's like, no. Fun is what you get when you're doing your job well. It should not be the goal. The goal should not be to have fun directly. You should be doing the job well and having fun doing that. I hate to be so parental about this, but if you just have people goofing around and just having fun, you get what you had over at the Fox part of the schedule. Especially in like the Adam Alexander one, where they're just palling around and they're laughing and they're goofing around. And yeah, maybe every once in a while they'll describe something that's happening on the track, but they're not informing you. They're forgetting what their role is. Their role isn't to be on TV having fun. Their role is to tell you what's happening. I don't understand this modern view that believes that a play-by-play television broadcast is somehow, is like a vestigial organ. It's not something that needs to be there. It's a redundancy. It's like, no. It's a critical element. And this is why Formula One, is still a threat, I think, to a lot of the American viewers. This is why IndyCar is closing the gap on NASCAR, because they treat it more seriously. And yes, NBC does a better job of this than Fox, but it doesn't mean that they're infallible. It doesn't mean that they're the standard. And if Fox just does what NBC does, then everything will be fine. It's like, no, it's a little more complicated than that. There's a middle ground here where I think both can learn from each other, and they just kind of need to kind of get that figured out. And I don't know if it's just the TV negotiations are probably going to really make that difficult, or what. But there's other paths to it. So I applaud NBC for trying different things, but I think a lot of the things that they're trying are things that weren't really problems, but it's like, this is kind of a nice feature to add. Again, like the Chiron, like the pit road timing and scoring, and just getting the information out there for the viewers. I feel like I'm certainly seeing more of the field in these NBC broadcasts than the Fox races. Absolutely, undoubtedly. And I feel like I'm missing less in these NBC broadcasts, which is great. I just think that they should just keep going. Like, just keep, as long as they're not resting on their laurels the way Fox really seems like they have, that's good. Because I think it's tempting, since NBC is still kind of new to coming back into the sport since 2015, 2016. You can still there's still some things that have kind of been a little bit of an issue since then that haven't been fixed since then. So that's kind of where I am with that. I think this was a good start. But again, I think Chicago is going to be really eye-opening, because this is the other part of it. People always say, well, you want to have the group having a good time. It's like, okay, yeah, but I want them to have a good time doing a good job. It's like, you're excited. It used to be like you have a broadcast that would end, like the 79 500 happened, and like the crew, they celebrated after that, because it's like, yeah, we did it. We nailed it. We made sure we didn't miss the moments. We had the right camera angles. We got a great broadcast. Whoever saw this had a tremendous time. That's when you have a good time, and then you want to just do it that much better each time. It shouldn't be just having fun in and of itself, and it sounds heartless to say it, but that's where the director, whoever's directing the people needs to be the adult in the room, and they need to make sure that the play-by-play guy is the adult in the booth, and that leads everything along the way, and that's what you need to have, and again, if you're looking for somebody that's going to enforce the rule, enforce this, or if you want somebody to make the calls, hey, my email's open. I'm starting to think that would probably be a better fit for me than actually being in the booth. But who knows? It's all dreamscape stuff at this moment anyway. Because if ultimately the NBC is probably in the same situation as Fox, where they're playing to an audience of one, And as long as that person's happy, they're not going to change a thing. And so we could all be barking at the moon, and that would be just the end of it. So, but Chicago is going to be interesting. And the reason I mention this is, you think about, if you think about broadcasting, you think about big moments. You think about the 79 500. You think about like the first NASCAR race that's broadcast live, flag to flag. You think about big races. You think about the 92 Hooters 500. You have a big championship, and everybody, all the way down, along with like Ken Martin, who was their statistical guy, has to put together all these statistics to keep track of where Davey Allison and Alan Kawicki and Bill Elliott are running, and they're going to keep track of where these numbers are because they got to make the call. And they got to make the call about like, okay, if this happens, then this person's going to win the championship. And you got to figure all this out. It's just everybody working to the highest degree, and they're having a good time because this is what they live for. This is the moment that they have. You think about the 94 Brickyard 400, where you have all this history and all this anticipation, more than a year's worth, like 1 million people on the waiting list trying to get tickets to a race that already has just a tremendous amount of seating capacity, and how many people had to get turned away for that, how many cars didn't qualify for the race. Those broadcasts, if you watch any of those, they rise to the occasion. They make it feel as big and important as it is. And, given how much Steve Phelps talked about this Chicago race last year at Phoenix, in spite of the championship, in spite of having just done the Clash in the Coliseum that year, this was the thing that he is absolutely excited about, that he's passionate about, to bring a different group of fans into the sport, to have that connection like Parker Kligerman was bringing up here to the history of auto racing itself. There's a lot riding on this one here, and the broadcast needs to be locked in to do that. I like that they had a teaser for it in this. I think a lot of ways this Nashville race was treated as 400 miles to Chicago street course race. And it was kind of treated kind of secondary to that. I certainly felt that way, especially after having the race, this late in the day here today. But there's a lot riding on this one, and it may only be, maybe even if it ends up maybe only being the only year they do it, because we're hearing some rumblings about other road courses that maybe come back to the schedule next year, and which races are those going to replace? We don't know. But the broadcast needs to be there. If it could well be that you have all this hype and you have all this buildup, and then the broadcast just kind of does the same thing they always do. And if you play the audio to this, there's no sense of grandeur or what's unique or special about this race. It just becomes another race. It just becomes kind of ordinary. And it's just like, NASCAR racing from the Chicago street courses brought to you by da-da-da-da. And it's like, oh, and he goes for the lead, and or they're just talking over each other constantly, and you can't, you go the other direction, they get too much excitement, and nobody's describing what's happening, they're just reacting to stuff, and it's like just trying to find a balance there. I think this next week is going to be a really good measuring stick as to where modern broadcasting is. It's going to be another benchmark. Much like the Busch Clash was. I think the Clash, from a broadcasting standpoint, was very frustrating to watch because you couldn't tell what the hell was happening at a track that was so small that you could have just had a camera point at the entire track for the entire 2 hours and got a much better grasp of what was actually happening than all these trick shots and ground shots and close-up shots. And I think that problem was made worse this year. It was unfortunate. I think I hated missing the Clash this year because I felt like I hardly got any grasp of what was happening this time around. They didn't even show the podium thing there. So for NBC, this is going to be their Busch Clash race. Are they, it's like, I know they're shaking the rust off. It's the first race of the year. They're doing Nashville, and that's probably why they still kept this at the July 4th weekend instead of, this weekend of the schedule. But I think that'll be another thing. I think that'll be another thing to look at. So, are we going to see the same problems or the same just disorganized manner of the broadcast that we saw, a little bit here when they're kind of getting their feet under them? Are we going to see a bit more, of an assertive role out of Rick Allen? Is he going to have, some better calls here of the action? Does he have something kind of in the back of his mind if it turns out to be, something, particularly special in this race in that sense? That's what we're going to see. But I think if it's not treated any differently, if it's just treated in the very cavalier sense, I think that would be an issue. But that'll be something that we'll talk about for next week's show for sure. I feel like I've ramped on that too much. Yeah, and again, I think that I saw some comments here on this where they talked about the breakdown of the next gen car. We talked about this last year at Nashville, where NBC took over the broadcast and they did their cutaway car thing, and they talked about like, oh yeah, there's this extra little. This is how the wheel bolts on, and actually there's this little thing that pokes up, where if it doesn't poke up, that means that the wheel's not locked into place. And we didn't hear about that at all during the first 16 races of the season. It's like you got all these wheels coming off, and there was never a mention on any of the Fox broadcasts saying, oh, well, that must be because this button didn't come up here that showed that the wheel wasn't locked on. It took till NBC to do that. And I know, I'm treating the broadcast in isolation of social media, because obviously there's, you got your you got your Stern bombs and so forth out there, that Justin Toronto and all these other guys out there that are doing a fantastic job of keeping up with all these things. Not to mention Bob Pockrass, with any of these changes to the car and how it's going to have an effect of the structure of the cars. But again, the TV broadcast is the main way that people experience this. If you're not at the track, that's the way you're watching the race. If you don't follow these things on social media, because not everybody does, and not everybody follows the same channels, that's where you really got to pick it up. So the one they did tonight, I agree. I thought that was fantastic. That was another point massively in NBC's favor when Steve Letarte slowed down a little bit and went into that graphic and showed specifically, even to the point of actually, here's the part that was there last year, and they took it out, and then they swapped in this, or they just left it out. It made it so much clearer. I know we saw a little bit of that with Fox. I don't want to be unfair to Fox completely on this, for sure, because they did talk about, I remember in the rear crushing of the car, I think this came up when Yaley had that wreck at Richmond, and they showed the cage around the rear fuel cell, and you could see that it didn't have as much bracing in there, and they made the comparison. They did do that, but it was nowhere near as comprehensive as just tonight, and just that one graphic halfway through the race, where they showed all these other struts. It was not, I always figured it was just one thing they took out. Like maybe they tweaked the rear bumper a bit and they got rid of these bracings and that was it. But then you had this other bracing that was in the front of the engine. And you got these other parts that were kind of removed, or the fact that you have like a brace that's now got a crooked cross members to it, so that it's able to be crushed, but it still offers reinforcement. So it's not going to crush so much beyond a certain point. That was great. That was great. I mean, color coding things to show things that were removed and all that. That was, it used to be Fox was the one with all the crazy graphics. It certainly was the case when they started up. Yeah, I think that was definitely another point in their favor there for sure. So again, I think there's a lot of things that, NBC is doing well, but I would caution against saying, oh, well, this is completely perfect. They do it great, and all that, and there's nothing they could possibly improve. And because I'm seeing what I don't like. I don't like it when, you can bring up concerns you have about this network too. And it's like, oh, well, you guys just aren't happy about anything. You're not happy about anything. You don't like it when it's this, but you also don't like it when it's that. It's like, no. Two things can exist in the same universe and both have problems. It's silly to say that just because another thing exists and does it better, that means that there's not also problems with it. I can't believe this has to be explained, but it does, I guess. But that's Twitter, and I know that Twitter is not real life, and thank goodness it isn't, because I don't think, I don't think I'd be able to stand that. So that's kind of where I am there with the broadcast side of it. So I'm sure I'm going to delve more into that. But before I go into that, let me go into more the other races from this weekend here, and we'll talk about Xfinity and trucks. So again, congratulations to AJ Allmendinger pulling off the Xfinity Series win. Riley Herbst was your runner-up finisher in that. Again, I believe his third runner-up finish in this, did not lead any laps, but still good to see him get some runs. I mean, I know that, especially with the rhetoric around Josh Berry and the discussion that came up about pay drivers in the sport, I know that Riley feels that same, his ears were probably burning at that point there in particular. But I don't like seeing anybody struggle. I don't like seeing anybody fail. Even with the stuff I do, the last place thing. I mean, it could be anybody. It's just, it's certainly in the Xfinity race here. It was particularly, unfortunate to see. But on top of that, you got a guy there that's trying to break through and to win. Has made more than 100 starts now, trying to get through. And I think if he's showing any improvement, that's still deserving of note. And again, I have always had faith in NASCAR that through the number of spots that are available, even before the charter system in the Cup Series, that there's only so many spots, and if you're not out there and you're not performing at a certain level, there's just enough people that are always going to be coming up the pipeline, that are always going to be coming in there, that you're not going to be sticking around there for long. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much sponsorship you have. It's just not going to work. At some point or another, you're going to be into another series, or maybe you'll find a place that fits really well. Kevin Conway was a Rookie of the Year in 2010, and now he's like a Lamborghini Trofeo champion or something. It could happen for anybody. I mean, it's a big world out there. NASCAR isn't the only game in town. It may get a lot of attention, a disproportionate amount in some cases, but that's another part of it. It's a guy like Riley Herbst. If he pulls off a win there, I'd celebrate just as much as anybody else. Again, kudos to him on the runner-up finish there. Sam Mayer from 34th on the grid to finish in third. Austin Hill coming back from serious rear end damage in his car with a bit of a tangle there earlier in the race. And Josh Berry himself finishing in the 5th spot there. Great run for all of them. John Hunter Nemechek in 6th, Zane Smith in 7th. Another fine run for, again, another Stewart-Haas entry, although entered under RSS, basically the same team that we saw out of Eric Almirola at Sears Point a couple weeks ago. Great job by Zane getting 7th. Daniel Hemrick in 8th, Cole Custer 9th, and Parker Retzlaff bounces back from his last place run at Sears Point to get a 10th place finish out there. No doubt a very hot and exhausting race like it was last year. But Retzlaff has, again, found a way to really dig deep, almost as deep as Parker Kligerman did. Was not feeling well coming into this weekend. Had to take a couple IVs, going into the Saturday race there. Comes back, and in spite of a spin on the last lap, coming to the stripe, still finishes the race in 11th spot. So kudos to him on that and the Big Machine team. He's still the leader in the Last Car Xfinity series because he's the only driver, I believe, with 2 last place finishes. But again, he's shown a lot of improvement and still knocking on the door of that first win. So hopefully things are going to kind of turn around for him coming up here soon as well. Your last place finisher in that had a very quick last place battle in this, unlike the Cup Series race earlier tonight. Stephen Parsons was collected in an accident going into turn 1. He had a tangle up between a couple of the Sieg cars there. Jeb Burton had a little bit of a role in that there too. But the 29 and the 39 spinning up into the outside wall. Looked like Parsons had pretty much cleared it, but he was skating up the track there, got into Allgaier. Allgaier hooked Parsons into the outside wall. And with a nice new sponsor there on the 07, it was unfortunate to see because he had a gorgeous paint scheme there. That white and green there kind of looked like an old manuscript or like an old plate or something like that. The Nelson's Greenbrier machine. Parsons, the outside wall, his second last place finish at Nashville alone, and his first since he was last at Nashville in the Doge car back in 2021 when he was driving for BJ McLeod. So an unfortunate deal for him, I believe the third last place run for SS Greenlight Racing. So again, difficulties continue there for that program this year. We'll see if things turn around for him. I'm not sure if he's entered in Chicago next week. The entry lists this week are certainly going to be fascinating coming up, but we'll find out. Ty Gibbs, Carson Hocevar, both involved in an accident a little bit later in the race there. Gibbs into the outside wall. Connor Mosack with a damaged vehicle policy, and Sammy Smith bringing out the bottom 5 there. Both Ty Gibbs and Sammy Smith each leading at least one lap. Gibbs leading 28 laps in the race there, still ending up in the bottom 5. Josh Williams had, I think it was a fuel pump issue. We're seeing a lot of this, really, especially in Xfinity and trucks, and it certainly played a role in the truck race, too. We'll talk about that next. But getting Josh Williams there back on track and climbing up there to finish in the 33rd spot, although it lists him out with an alternator issue. It's still out of the race, but did manage to climb out of the bottom 5 there at the end of that race. Another driver that had a lot of struggles in that one was certainly CJ McLaughlin. CJ got involved in an accident in practice, much like we saw back at Las Vegas. They went to a backup car and ended up swapping him out of the car, put another driver in there, not due to injury, thankfully, but it sounds like they were just trying a more conservative run out there. Put Joey Gase in the car. Gase ends up back in 31st place there to finish the race, right behind teammate David Starr in the number 35. Let's see here. Looking back up the rankings, there was a little bit of a scuffle over the radio, between Kyle Weatherman and Brennan Poole. Poole and Weatherman were both asked about it on pit road, made it sound like there wasn't much more to become of it, certainly from Weatherman's standpoint there. Poole said Weatherman got into him during the race. Weatherman said he didn't. We'll see where all that shakes out next week. Weatherman himself being in the 4 car was certainly a bit surprising, given the fact that he had the Trophy Tractor sponsorship on it that Garrett Smithley undoubtedly brought to the team. Trophy Tractor has sponsored many of Smithley's runs, but of course there was a bit of a change over there. Ty Dillon was actually originally entered in that car this week. Must have been a leftover from Sears Point when Dillon was entered in the 4 car there and didn't qualify for the race. Here in this case, Weatherman being swapped in. And again, talk about drivers getting cycled through one point or another. I mean, Garrett Smithley's been on that ride so many times, started his career in Cup, driving for Starcom Racing. It's not around anymore. He was in the 0 car for Johnny Davis for all those years. And again, trying to make something happen with Davis, and just had some terrible luck between qualifying and early wrecks. I hate to see the guy struggle. He's a good kid out there, and it's just tricky, And again, when you got only so many spots out there and so many opportunities, you just got to try to grab what you can grab, and whether that's trying to go back to trucks or just finding another opportunity there, that's the best you can. So I certainly wish him the best of luck on whatever he's working on here going forward. Let's see here. Justin Allgaier got some damage there in the Stephen Parsons incident at the beginning of the Xfinity race. Still came back to finish in the 15th spot there. Brett Moffitt, we saw a bit out of him. The Kevin Zawinski AM Racing entry was right up there for parts of that race. Unfortunately, ends up just outside the top 10 there in the final stages. But again, solid Xfinity race. You have a lot of different, you look at the drivers based on laps led. You had a lot of people that had a hand in being competitive there at one point or another. Certainly Kligerman, Chandler Smith, of course, Cole Custer, and then ultimately Allmendinger just leading 25 laps there. Competitive race, and no shortage of storylines there to bring up at the same time. And then going back over to the Truck Series race. So the first thing you got to mention on this is just absolute heartbreak for Raja Karuth. Raja was going for the lead there about 20 or 30 laps into the race, had just taken the lead at the front of the pack. I believe Corey Heim, he was racing at the time, or actually it was Bailey Curry was racing Corey Heim. He was also having a great night. But Raja Karuth in particular, it's just bad luck that happens every once in a while. And sometimes it happens when you're the closest to absolutely breaking through. I know Greg Biffle went through this at a period in his career, and then he came out and he beat Jeff Gordon at Darlington, and he had a great season from there on. Carl Edwards had this problem. It wasn't just a Roush issue, although it sometimes sounds like it. But if you think of Raja's run at Darlington, and then this here, and he had the other tangle with Ty Majeski a little while back, any one of those could have been a top 5 or a win, certainly here. But unfortunately, finishes back at the 32nd spot there after qualifying a strong third out there. His day will come. I mean, that's the advantage with NASCAR, having as many races as it does. We got another opportunity out there, and I'm sure he'll be one to watch here in a couple weeks. I guess Pocono is, I believe, the next one for them. They're obviously not running the Chicago Street Course race But we'll see how things shake out for him. On the other end of the field there, Lawless Allen, your last place finisher, and he was not too happy with Haley Deegan in the early laps there. I came into the race a little bit later, but I was kind of picking up what had happened at that point. Certainly Deegan breaking loose on the apron, which is something we saw certainly a bit of in the Xfinity race as well. Give her the benefit of the doubt on that, but ultimately the result was the same. 45 truck gets chased up the track. He almost saves it, hooks it to the right. And kind of similar to Stephen Parsons, gets tangled up there over with the number 51 truck of Jack Wood, and both of them involved in that accident. Allen comes back out with some damage, cuts down another tire, finishes the truck off, unfortunately, and ends up in last place there. First time he's finished last since we were in Phoenix back in 2021, and he had a weird incident on the front straightaway there. So that'll be something. Mid-Ohio's this weekend? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul, for reminding me on that. Yes, Mid-Ohio will be great. That's where Stephen Malozzi got his first Truck Series start last year, so that'll be exciting. So, yeah, okay, goodness. That's going to be a stacked weekend on that. Is it really this weekend? I somehow thought it was Atlanta weekend. Is it Atlanta? Okay, I got to look at that again. I'm pretty sure you're right, though. No, okay, July 8th. Yeah, that's not this weekend. That'd be next weekend. That'd be Atlanta. Because it's July 1st and 2nd this weekend. So, yeah, Mid-Ohio's next weekend. Okay, good. Because that would be almost too much stuff happening between the Chicago Street Course and then having the truck standalone in Mid-Ohio. So that'll be a good one to check out there, too. We get more of the road course ringers out there. Memphis Villarreal and G2G Racing back at the track there again. Unfortunately, another early exit, electrical issues there for the number 46. I wasn't listening to the radio there at the time, so I don't really have other details on that. Big thanks to several people at the track, especially Jared Haas at Front Stretch, that provided some excellent photos of all three of the last place finishers and was able to catch what was happening there in the garage area. So big thanks to him. That really was a huge help there for the articles this weekend. You'll already see his work on both my Xfinity and truck articles, and he already got some great pictures of Ryan Blaney tonight, again, pending the results of post-race inspection. So we'll find out there. Brett Holmes, I felt terrible for Brett on that. He's been running so many races without any sponsorship on that 32, trying to get the best runs he can, can't afford to tear up equipment. He had a 2-truck incident on the backstretch, and I think he was a bit hard on himself, saying that he just kind of plowed into it there. I think he was trying to avoid it. There was just no way through. The hole closed up, and he ended up getting in a wreck there. He was sponsored by a Nissan dealership there, which was kind of interesting. Somebody was right to point out the other examples of other teams that have been sponsored by manufacturers that have either not been in NASCAR or haven't in a very long time. Certainly Nissan being the former. But regardless, Brett Holmes back in 34th. Dean Thompson with another terrible run here for him. Again, I think he's just riding the roller coaster to the end of the season and hopefully getting some more strong runs and potentially a win there for him. But he, this week, is 33rd, and Roger Carruth rounding out the bottom 5 there in the 32nd spot. Ty Majeski, Jack Wood, Colby Howard, and Haley Deegan in the next few spots ahead of them. But the victory belongs to Carson Hocevar, as Ross Chastain mentioned in Victory Lane tonight, or I guess on the front stretch rather. Worldwide Express sweeping the weekend here between Hocevar's truck win and his Cup Series win there. Skipping over, of course, the Xfinity Series race there with Allmendinger. Zane Smith in the second spot there. Smith looked like he was tracking him down. Couldn't quite pull it off there. Nick Sanchez, Corey Heim, and again, another great run from this race. Bailey Curry in the 5th spot. Started outside pole, 13 thousandths of a second from winning his first career pole. Nick Sanchez just beating him there in qualifying. Just like we saw the great run that Curry had at Atlanta. This is another one that's good to see. I mean, again, much like with Weatherman in the Xfinity Series, these are two drivers that used to be teammates at Mike Harmon's team in 2020, and I've always kind of been intrigued by whatever both those drivers are able to do and capitalize on some of these runs. This time around here, he actually took the lead under green, much like Raja Carruth did, and getting the top spot there. Again, unfortunately, just didn't shake out, and he finishes back in the 5th place run there, but he looked very excited in his post-race interview, calling it a career run for him, and that's definitely one thing to certainly talk about. Rounding out your top 10 there, Chase Purdy, Matt DiBenedetto, Tyler Ankrum, Ben Rhodes, and Jake Garcia with has certainly become a almost regular in the top 10 lately here with the McAnally number 35. He's kind of stealing some of the thunder from Christian Eckes there in the flagship 19. So kudos to Garcia again on that. Let's see, looking further back in the lineup, actually some decent runs here. Mason Maggio got a top 20 for the Realm brothers. Nick Lights in that number 20 entry for the Young's Motorsports entry. That 20 team seems like they struggle just about every week, and certainly with sponsorship too. But Nick, I think it's only maybe his second or third start. Where was it here? Fifth start. Okay, second this year. Fifth start for Nick Lights there, but a great 19th place run for him. Tony Bradinger, I don't think we've talked about her that much on the show here, but really in just a few starts, I've been very impressed with how she's been able to kind of keep that equipment under her and just bring it home in one piece and still climbing up from the back of the pack. I mean, she had to kind of miss the Lawless Allen wreck at the beginning and did that and was able to kind of survive and advance. And again, that's a strong entry. The Tricon Garage effort, the Toyota support. But I'd love to see her, get a more consistent ride with that. I know the number one is kind of shared between multiple different drivers, but I'm liking what I'm seeing so far on this. So hopefully that'll certainly continue there too. Welcome back, Corey Roper, back in the 21st spot there after starting third from last in the race there. So kudos to him. Kind of interested to see him back in the show there after he hadn't put different drivers in the truck, and we hadn't really seen the team since Wilkesboro, where they had an electrical issue there with Johnny Sauter, but that's a whole other story there at the same time. So let's see. We kind of check this at the same time here. Kind of checking out Pockrass's page here at the same time. One thing I did over this last off weekend, just so you guys know, I really enjoyed sharing the pictures from Sears Point in our last show here about 2 weeks ago. But I wasn't happy with just like the little thumbnail thing and you couldn't see them very well. So I've invested in a second screen for this. Big thanks to those of you in the Patreon for your support on the channel, because that definitely allowed me to be able to do that. So we're going to get that set up over here. I'd love to kind of get it. It's going to be kind of off screen on this direction here. And then I'd love to be able to kind of add a more visual component to the show, so you're not just looking at me the whole time. We can kind of have some fun with that. So I'd like to do some more stuff with, like, again, you have like stories that come up during the race. You can pull a Twitter feed up and see some stuff from that, or video. And then certainly, yeah, again, we do some trackside coverage, definitely share some pictures through there. We've done a little bit of that with the J-Ski deal and all that, but trying to do it on one screen just hasn't really worked out very well, and so I'm going to kind of try something different here. So that's in the works. So hopefully, I'm going to hope to kind of get some practice with it. Screen comes in tomorrow. I'm going to kind of practice with it here, and then hopefully be able to get it hooked up for Chicago. And I have a feeling we're going to have no shortage of stories from that race weekend in general. So we'll probably need that for that weekend, but we'll get something set up here for you guys on that there too. So let me get into this. We'll do some trivia here in a little bit too, and we'll jump into that. The one thing NBC doesn't have is the ghost car, says Michael Paul. Yeah, no, there's that too. Uh-oh, are we lagging? Uh-oh. Hopefully we're not lagging. I haven't seen a whole lot of the comments here, so hopefully we haven't. Yeah, let me know in the chat there if we're having any issues here with the audio or the video. But I don't see anything on here on my end. All right. Yeah, Andrew Bremner, I'm seeing your comment. I'm lost on the schedule following Pocono. Yeah, you and me both. Yeah, still trying to figure that out. It's cool to see Carl Edwards at the track again. Guess got to mention that at the same time. So that was pretty hip. So we'll do that. Okay. Yeah, not seeing anything from Pockrass's page, so we don't have a call on Tech Inspection. I appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. I know it's a bit of a later night show here following Nashville. We're at 8:30 p.m. Pacific here, so again, 11:30 p.m. Eastern. So I do on a weekend it's not a holiday. We're not going to go too much further in the show here tonight, folks. I know we got people on the East Coast here. So we'll just do the best we can at this. I'm not seeing anything. Definitely say something in the chat if we're, whether we're having issues or not. I'm not seeing anything on this. So hopefully that hasn't shaken out there. In the meantime, instead of just vamping here, we'll go ahead and just do some trivia here to wrap up the evening. I think that'll stir things up a little bit. Alrighty. So, okay, there we go. Felt bad for Trey Hutchins not making the race. Yeah, exactly, that too. I mean, again, only so many spots for so many teams, but, especially after Hutchins had that wreck there with the Texas. I'm glad they were able to piece another entry together. Also, it's too bad that Justin S. Carroll withdrew as well. I would have been loved seeing the both those teams have a shot at qualifying. I don't know if they're going to do anything at the road course. It seems like that's something that they're not really doing on their end, but they seem to kind of focus more on the ovals, but you never know. Alrighty. Okay. So we'll do the late 90s trivia deal here for the latter part of the show here. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. The categories, once again, are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Go ahead and mention in the chat which category you'd like. Categories, again, are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. And those are the categories. So I got a couple things here for show and tell in the meantime. So we'll go ahead and do that here while you guys kind of vote on which category you'd like, and we'll do a few questions here to wrap up the show. First things first, I brought up on the eBay page here that I now have some new stickers for the page. I decided to try something a little different here. In the past, I've just had like these larger stickers, which I still have some, these bumper stickers, 3 by 10 inch ones here. But I know not everybody kind of prefers those, but we still have those on the page. But in the meantime, I've added some other stuff to the group there. Of course, we have what was left from the Brad Perez sponsorship at Sears Point. I still have these cars and other decals on there. And all these stickers I'm showing here are $5 each on the eBay page, or I believe it's a buy 3, get 1 free on that. And I do combine shipping on that. I did, I think I had some confusion on that earlier where it's like, wait, is it $5 each sticker? I'm like, no, absolutely not. So I definitely wanted to make sure that that was correct. If you're interested in any of this here, I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat here as well. I did get on, hang on, let me get that dropped in. That earlier where it's like, wait, is it $5 each sticker? I'm like, no, absolutely not. So I definitely wanted to make sure that there we go. All right. But yeah, kind of had fun with this here. I did kind of reprints. I know we did some of the ones here with the Jason Leffler stickers. I know those were quite popular. But I did a few other ones here. Found some did some reprints of old Todd Bodine stickers there. Got Jeremy Mayfield from 97. And then, of course, just ones with just the NASCAR logo itself on there. And so, again, yeah, smaller ones here. These are 3-inch circular ones, so a little bit more of like the standard size there. One thing that was kind of fun when I ordered this, I wanted to do stickers out of the actual logos that I have there when I do like the last change and the behind the wall logos. And I wasn't sure how big to make them. I kind of just used the standard file that I used on these. But they all came out kind of small. This is about how small they came up. So if you're interested on that, these are about, I guess, gosh, it's not, it's a little bit more than 3 inches. I think these are 4 inches wide on this, but some of them on here. So what I did is instead of having these separate, I had a bundle where if you're interested in all 4 of these, so again, we have the last change one. We got the It's Alive graphic. And we also have the behind the wall, very much the same like on the show here. And then, of course, the driver that has fallen out of the race. They have a pack of all 4 of these for $10 there on that page, and you'll see that as well. And we group that together. So we have that. I brought back the Buddy Arrington sticker on here because I know that was quite popular with the Arrington video from last year. So I have that brought up. We made a sticker out of the 500 days countdown clock. So again, kind of a little bit of a simpler design. And we have not 1, but 2 field fillers stickers on here. We have one with just saying the field fillers to scale in terms of how loud the intro is, and then another one here with the actual logo for Rise of the Field Fillers itself. So if you're looking for something to decorate your water bottle or your binder or your car or anything else, I have just about anything for your interest there at the same time. And so again, on these, pretty much all the designs, it is buy 3, get 1 free, $5 shipping on that as well. I group it all together, put it in one of these in flexible folders there. The shipping cost just kind of offset the cost of these envelopes there, and sent those out. Just sent out a couple this week, so big thanks to those of you that are interested in that. And if you're interested in some Last Car swag, we definitely have that available. The one sticker that's excluded on this right now is the Kenny Irwin one. That's because the proceeds from those stickers are going to the Kenny Irwin Foundation. I actually sold a couple more of those just recently, so big thanks to those of you who picked up those as well. So we'll have that. But we'll definitely check that out. Alrighty. Seeing guesses for different categories. Okay, we've got several. Looks like drivers is pretty much the overwhelming one on this. So maybe we'll do some drivers questions. I see in the chat here, Andrew, I see your question on that too. What do you think of the Chicago Street Course? Look, I kind of talked more about the broadcast angle of it rather than the track itself, so definitely good to bring up. But I'm interested. I mean, as it happens, as a matter of fact, Derek Cope, whose book I'm still working on, trying to get that across the finish line here. He actually ran on a street course at the Tacoma Grand Prix back in the 80s. And that race, without giving too much away, there's kind of a pretty good story about it behind that that's in the book that's coming up here. Was a pretty significant race in his own career there. With different cars. I'm not sure how, the Winston West cars that he ran, this was about, I think, 85, 86, would be certainly pretty different from the way these modern cars are going to handle. But, it's hard to say. I think part of this, it's definitely going to be a lot of follow the leader. The confines, as tight as they're going to make this, and then try to widen it up on the actual streets themselves, are we going to get something equivalent of like the Detroit Grand Prix that we saw the IndyCar series run a few weeks ago? Probably not. Certainly in terms of the speeds that the cars are capable of, and how forgiving or unforgiving these barriers are going to be for the cars. I don't know. I'm not sure what to expect. Somehow in my mind's eye, the first thing that comes to mind is that go-kart race that Rusty Wallace did with Tony Danza, where they hooked bumpers and Danza flipped his car and, thankfully it was okay. It just seems like, there's whether or not there's going to be a lot of side-by-side racing or even somebody like being able to just, completely route somebody out of the way. I don't know. You could have a scenario where, the leader just kind of runs and hides. Are they even going to have stage cautions in this, or is it still under the same road course rule where we're not having stage cautions? I didn't even think about that till just now. I guess that's going to be playing a role. Part of the track that I think is most intriguing to me, I got to say, is that long curved part by the, I guess it's by the fountain or by the entryway of the park. The fact that typical street course, of course, you're going to be going through intersections. You're going to have all these hard right-hand and left-hand turns, and it's going to be, real abrupt and, no margin for error, and people knocking each other in the wall. And we're going to go through so many toe links this weekend. I think it's going to be dizzying. I think it's going to get to be difficult for people to even drop to the back of the field in this one. But that rounded turn is the most intriguing to me, because I think, I don't know how much speed they're going to be able to carry through there. But I think in terms of like somebody doing like a really over aggressive move, it's probably going to end up triggering a pile up that's going to cause everybody to run into each other. That's probably where you're going to end up having that happen. But I think that's the most unique and interesting kind of figure or feature rather from this track. I'd be very interested to see how that kind of all shakes out. So I don't know. I think that's going to be kind of something to look at. Qualifying is absolutely going to be tremendously essential. I think qualifying is probably going to be one of the best parts of the weekend there. How well it's going to be broadcast for both Xfinity and Cup, we'll see. But this is going to be probably the most valuable poll of the entire year. because you're just going to have that track position. And, whatever the situation is on pit road and strategy and so forth, if you're able to run off and hide as best as you can, obviously there's going to be some limitations there with and lap traffic. I mean, how's that going to work out? You don't seem to see as much of that in IndyCar, at least just with the size of the fields. I know having 36 cars is not, ideal, with that. And I guess we're going to probably have some other, expansion entries out there. I mean, I love having big fields for anything. But I think it just in terms of the lap traffic, that's going to be fascinating. The last place battle is going to be, I hope it's not settled too soon. I hope it's that somebody doesn't just break their, just snap a toe link and destroy the rear of their car in the first lap. I hope it's not that. If it's anything past that, I think it's going to be kind of an interesting battle at the back of the field there, as much as it's going to be up front. So, hopefully it's a good crowd. Hopefully, it looks like they got good infrastructure that they built up around the track. I like that they brought the tents out for the souvenir thing instead of the trailers. I think that's a huge win. Look, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you that plain. I spent more money at doing the tents than I ever have. Ever. This year I spent a bit more, I got to say, at Serious Point this year, but nowhere near what I spent back at the tents there in 2016. You had it all there, and it had a clearance section of old stuff. That was the greatest. So I'm actually pretty envious of them having that this time. But yeah, I don't know what we're going to find out. NASCAR doesn't have Stingray Raw, but yeah, there's another way to look at it too. I think it's going to be, I think at best you're going to have single file. I think the passes for the lead are probably going to happen mostly on pit road. Lap traffic is the big question. That's what I want to see how it's going to play out. And, if there's going to be stage cautions or all that. I don't know. I think it's again, I don't want to come into it with too many expectations, because I think really the drivers certainly don't know what to expect. Who's going to be the favorite? Do you think it's going to be like a guy that's really good at road courses traditionally, like a Martin Truex, like a Kyle Larson? Or do you think it's going to be somebody really unusual that's just not a fit anywhere? Are any of the ringers going to be more of a factor in this one? Where does a guy like AJ Allmendinger fall? That's going to be interesting. So, and I'm glad that I don't know what to expect, because I think that's what, ideally every race would feel that way. Although I know that, with races that we usually have, you're going to have trends from one driver to the next. So that's kind of the other way to look at it. There has to be footage of that race around the Tacoma Dome. Yeah, that would be exciting too. So we'll see. Yeah, be a snooze fest or wreck fest. I think we'll probably have both. We'll probably get most of the wrecks out of the way of the Xfinity race, because I think those cars damage in a way that's more spectacular, and they don't have the toe link issues. So there's kind of going to be that issue. But I don't know. It's going to be a circus one way or the other. The big thing I want to see is just how many people are going to turn out for it. Because I just don't know. I had a real hard time grasping how many people are even covering it, than how many people are going to be there. So I don't know. But I know that Steve Phelps is excited about it, and we'll see the net effect of that. This is definitely the one that got more hype probably than anything else this year, and this week is going to be even more hype, and I'm surprised NBC had any room in their attention span to cover this race this weekend, so I think they need to be credited for that too. But yeah, we'll see. Alrighty. So first question here. How many out of Richard Petty's career wins were on short tracks? Okay, don't look it up. Try to guess it. How many out of Richard Petty's career wins were on short tracks? A little more of the code red in the old 2003 cup holder here again for tonight. Thank you again for tuning in here for our later evening Nashville show here. For those of you just tuning in, we're just doing some trivia here to wrap up. First question of the evening was, how many out of Richard Petty's career wins were on short tracks. That's a good one. I'll say half his wins to 100. Okay, 89, 135, 44. It's a good question. Yeah, I'm really not sure either. How many out of Richard Petty's career wins were on short tracks? Alrighty. Just going to take a look at Pockrace's page again here while we're getting that queued up. Not seeing anything on there. I will mention while we're going with this here too. Again, earlier today and actually through this week, I was finally able to get some really good traction on my next video, which is going to be on the life and times of Trevor Boyes, which will be when I think I'd love to get it up this week. I think we're getting pretty close to it. I want to kind of tie it up. There's some other graphics I want to kind of include in there. Brian Hallman at BRH Racing Archives provided a ton of fantastic pictures I've been waiting to share with you guys on this one, and I think it's really going to help this video in particular. But again, those of you who are in the Patreon, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock, if you're in the $5 and up level, you'll have advanced access to that before the video goes live, and so we'll have that coming up for you guys here very soon. And I got some other videos that are in the works there as well. How many? Okay, here we go. How many out of Richard Petty's career wins were on short tracks? The answer is 139. 139 is the correct answer. BBM Potato at 135. You were really close. 139 is the correct answer. A lot of you were very close. You got a couple for 120, 113, 111, 125. Maserati 9, you were very close as well. 139 is the correct answer. Willie B at 154. Yeah, you were very close. All clear in inspection? All right, let's check that again. Okay, I don't see that on Pockrace's here, but I'm sure others have posted that there. We'll get to that when we get to that. All righty, do a couple more questions here. In the drivers category, who made his NASCAR Winston Cup debut as a 17-year-old high school student in 1982? This is a good one. Let me read that one again. Who made his NASCAR Winston Cup debut as a 17-year-old high school student in 1982? Try not to look it up. Yeah. J Skeet reported. Okay. That's good enough for me. I don't need that. Yes, okay, I do see it there. 1 minute ago. Inspection is complete at Nashville. No issues for Ross Chastain. He is officially the winner. So that means Ryan Blaney is officially your last place finisher for today's race in Nashville. So again, congratulations to Ross Chastain and Ryan Blaney. Your article, yep, there it is again. I see it 32 seconds ago from Bob Pockrace. Cup Tech is complete, confirming again Chastain is the winner, no issues. So yes, it would be a Ryan Blaney article tonight, and then that'll be up there a little bit later this evening. All right, let me read that question again. Who made his NASCAR Winston Cup debut as a 17-year-old high school student in 1982? All right, I guess it's for Bobby Hillen and Mark Martin and Ron Bouchard. All right, here we go. Read it one more time. Who made his NASCAR Winston Cup debut as a 17-year-old high school student in 1982? The answer is indeed Bobby Hillen. Bobby Hillen from Texas. A lot of you got that one there. Yes, Bobby Hillen. Bowser Jr. XD, I think you were the first one on that one. Maserati 9, you got it also. Charles Peterson. Mark Bancroft, Andrew Brebner. All right. Let's see. Alrighty, next question. Here we go. We got another Richard Petty question here for you guys. How many of 1972's 31 NASCAR Winston Cup races did Richard Petty lead? How many of 1972's 31 NASCAR Winston Cup races did Richard Petty lead? So we're looking for a number up to 31. How many of 1972's 31 NASCAR Winston Cup races did Richard Petty lead? Yeah, I got 27, 28, 37, 26. Yeah, it says 31, but if it's incorrect, yeah, go with whatever the correct number is. Hopefully it doesn't make it tricky that way. All right, I'll just read it this way. How many of 1972's NASCAR Winston Cup races did Richard Petty lead? All righty, and the answer is 30. 30 is the answer. 30 is the correct answer. Almost 31. Now, okay, 72, they didn't count the Twin 125s as points races that year. I think that was part of the modern era, that they got rid of that for a time. I mean, now you get some points for it, but let's see. Yeah, it was 31 races in 1972. And no, they did not count the qualifiers there, so that would explain why there would be one race he wouldn't have run, but that's not applying that. So like 72. He did not lead any laps. I'm seeing here in the one race he didn't lead laps, it was the 72, right? 72. It was the World 600 at Charlotte. He did not lead any laps to that. Bobby Allison led 239 and lost to Buddy Baker in another Petty Enterprises car that led 39 laps. Richard Petty did not lead any laps, and he finished in... Oh, he blew an engine and finished in 19th. Let's see here. Yeah, he led one lap in the fall Charlotte race and crashed. He led one lap in the fall Dover race and finished second. Fascinating. Yeah, here. I'll drop this in chat too. You can see this. Alrighty. So there you go. Okay. All right, we'll do one more question here for tonight, since we're coming up on midnight Eastern here, and we'll wrap up here for this evening. Last question for the evening in the category of drivers. What 1997 Winston Cup Rookie of the Year contender rode without a rookie stripe? What 1997 Winston Cup Rookie of the Year contender rode without a rookie stripe? Okay, try not to look that up too. Yeah, 30. That's crazy. Yeah, 30 out of 31. Just fascinating. Alrighty. What 1997 Winston Cup Rookie of the Year contender rode without a rookie stripe? Yep, thank you, Dawson. Yep, we do have confirmation. Chastain's the winner, and Blaney is your last place finisher, and no issues in inspection. Alrighty. What 1997 Winston Cup Rookie of the Year contender rode without a rookie stripe? Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'll let you guys have a little extra time there to get that one. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. Last time. What 1997 Winston Cup Rookie of the Year contender rode without a rookie stripe? The answer is Mike Skinner. Mike Skinner. Interesting that in 19 they didn't do the outline. Usually when they have a yellow bumper, we saw this with Josh Berry on the Chase Elliott car. They usually do like a little black outline around it. Same thing with Steve Park in the Pennzoil car in 1998. They did a little outline around it. So if you have a yellow car and you're a rookie, you still get the rookie stripes. But apparently in 97 with Skinner, they didn't do it. I never noticed that. I'm going to have to look it up. But yeah, go figure. I guess at that time they didn't really feel like doing it back then. So that's the last question for this evening, folks. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Congratulations to Ross Chastain on his first win this season. Very convincing victory here. Your last place finisher, Ryan Blaney. That's going to be the feature of the article that'll be up later tonight. The Xfinity and Truck Series articles are already up there. Next video, like I said, on Trevor Boys is in the works. Hope to have that done in the next week or so. I think we're getting pretty good. We made some good progress on it this morning. Luckily, having this race later in the day, I think, kind of helped out with that. So we'll have some more information on that coming up. In the meantime, my Twitter feed is @LastCarOnBrock. My Patreon is patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. And of course, the website is lastcar.info for more updates. Our next show is going to be next Sunday, after the conclusion of the Chicago Street Course race. We will know who will stand atop the the pile of wrecked cars or not. That is going to be at the end of that. And we'll also know who's going to be the first car out of the race for both the Xfinity and the Cup Series. It'll be one way or the other. I think it's going to be fascinating. It'll be an interesting experiment. I'm trying to go into it with an open mind, and I hope that everyone else will as well. And I wish NBC the best of luck in covering it. And we'll certainly do our part here as well at LastCar to bring you that end of the field there as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a great week, and we will see you all next time.